Normally I have Baryta loaded up in here, but today I have Photorag matte. Like a matte paper. Shh, don't tell anybody. Woohoo! Hey, real quick before we jump into the video, a couple of housekeeping items. You may have noticed that this video is a little bit late. I try to upload on Tuesdays. It's looking like this is probably going to be uploaded Saturday morning. A little late, I apologize for that. I've been booked on a job at an agency all week and I'm still figuring out how to fit YouTube videos in with my normal schedule. So thank you for your patience on that. Secondly, when I filmed this video, it was very early in the morning. I didn't do a sound check, and unfortunately some of the audio is a little bit less than stellar. I looked through all the footage. There's some really good information in here, and I like the way that it's taught. I don't think it needs to be reshot. Instead, I'm going to use this as a learning experience to make sure that I double check not only the video, but the audio. So thank you again for watching, and without further ado, let's print something on matte paper. Hi, my name is Mitch Boyer. I run a print shop called Nice Art Prints, and if you're new here, welcome. Each week, I make a print sent in from one of you, and then I mail it to you. In this video, we're printing a beautiful image sent in by Juliet. It was captured on 35mm film in Yosemite National Park. Make sure to check out Juliet's Instagram. She has some stunning images. There's a link in the description. And while you're there, like and subscribe if you haven't already, so that the YouTube algorithm will share this and we can introduce more people to the wonderful world of printing. Now, we're going to be printing this on Hahnemühle Photorag matte. Wait. If you've seen some of my other videos, you may be confused because you know I am a sucker for the semi-gloss, semi-pebbly texture of Baryta. I honestly believe it's the best paper for photos in the vast majority of situations. But even I will concede that in some cases, matte paper is better. I know. So let's make a list of a few situations where matte paper is the right paper for the job. One of them is if you're not going to be putting your print in a frame. Matte and semi-gloss or glossy, once it's behind a reflective piece of glass, they all start to look the same. But if you're going to be holding a print in your hand and looking at it, there is something nice about matte paper. There's no reflections from the gloss, so if you're next to a light, you don't have to worry about all that light being reflected into your eyes and blinding you. That part's not true. So yeah, sometimes if you're going to hold a print in your hands, matte paper is better. Another situation where matte paper is a little bit better is if you're working with an image where the highlights are clipped. Like this one. I mean, just all the highlights are clipped. Just kidding. This is just a sheet of blank paper. The Hahnemühle Photorag matte paper has this really nice texture, and then the nice thing is, in an image like where you have whites, this texture can kind of make up for it. When you're just looking at an image that's been blown out on a screen, there's no information there. It's literally just nothing. But on the paper, you have the texture. So if you're going from an area with texture to no texture because it's blown out, the texture of the paper kind of makes up for it. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Another area where matte paper performs exceptionally well is low contrast images, and we're going to talk about that also in a little bit. So let's recap really quick. A few reasons why you might want to use matte paper. You're not going to frame it. You've got some clipping in the highlights. It's a low contrast image. You're a hipster. Those are all reasons why you probably want to use matte paper. So Juliet's image here hits a couple of those points. If we look at this is probably from the scan that she got, but the highlights are a little bit clipped here in the clouds. You can kind of see how between the shadow and the highlight on the clouds we go from an area of a lot of texture to no texture. But not to fear, matte paper is going to come to the rescue, because again, as we transition into those highlights, the texture from the paper is gonna help that transition go smoothly. Let's zoom out on this image. If we look just overall, got this very ethereal quality. It's very soft. It's low contrast And if we look up here at the histogram, we can kind of see what's going on. Quick little primer on the histogram if you don't know. It's basically a graphical way to look at the information captured in the image file. So on the right hand side, you have the highlights. On the left hand side, you have the shadows, and in the middle, you have the midtones. If you ever forget that, if you're in Lightroom or Camera Raw, you can literally just highlight over each section and it will tell you what it is. As you can see here, it's the blacks, the shadows, exposure or the midtones, highlights, and whites. And if you're really confused, you can actually just click and drag each area. So you can see if we crush the shadows here by dragging them to the left, the image looks completely different. I'm going to reset it. So here you can see there's this nice soft roll off in the shadows. There's not a lot of contrast in the shadows, and we never hit like a zero black, which is really good actually for matte paper. Matte paper has a lower dynamic range than Baryta paper, especially on the low end in the shadows. So if you're thinking of dynamic range for a camera sensor or for film stock, that's determined by like how much light can the sensor or film stock absorb. And on the low end, it's talking about like how deep can the blacks go. On a paper, there's a little bit of a difference because at the high end, unlike a screen, you can't brighten paper. This is it. So the whitest white in an image is determined by how white the paper is. The darkest black in an image is determined by a combination of the ink that you use and the paper's tendency to absorb that ink. I'm using this handy little chart by this guy, Rocco and Cora. Down here on this test that I've done, the blacks kind of cap out here around 10 or 12, so they don't go all the way down to 0. But on this Baryta paper, they go down a little bit further, around like 6. So why is that? When a printer head is going across the paper, it drops little droplets of ink onto the paper. And depending on how absorbent that paper is, the ink is going to seep into it. Think of it like your phone, right? So a water droplet hits your phone, it kind of bubbles up and stays as a little bead on top of your phone. But if you're reading a book and a water droplet falls on the book, that water droplet seeps in. All inkjet papers have a barrier because if they didn't, like ink would just seep through all the paper. But glossy papers like Baryta tend to have a more resilient barrier. So inks sit a little bit better on top of that barrier than they do on the matte paper. They seep in a little more. And so that dilutes the color and the vibrancy of the ink. So again, matte papers tend to be better for low contrast images for that reason. Their blacks are not as deep and their colors aren't as vibrant. They require more ink to achieve the same kind of vibrancy that you would get with less ink on a Baryta paper. Maybe you're starting to see why I love Baryta so much. But again, this is not about Baryta. We're talking about matte paper today. So this matte paper, again, we don't need all these blacks here in the image that Juliet sent. You don't need that extra dynamic range, so matte paper works just great. It works great. So to recap really quickly, because we have a little bit of clipping in the highlights, in the clouds, and because we don't have really deep blacks in the overall image, it's kind of a low contrast image, this image is going to work great on the matte paper. Now I've already prepared the image for print. If you want to watch a video that goes into more detail on my process, you can watch last week's video. I spent about 20 minutes just showing you how I reduce noise and sharpen images and enlarge images for print. But today, we're just going to get right to it and print. I'm here in Canon's program Professional Print and Layout. I will do a whole nother video on this. I'll probably do a video on why I chose the Canon printer. But for now, I'm just going to do my quick little checklist before I print. I always check that I have the right media type. So yeah, this is the Hahnemühle Fine Art Photorag matte paper. That's good. It is coming from the paper roll. The size is correct. I'm using the correct ICC profile. My rendering intent is perceptual, which I like to use 90% of the time. That will be another video too. Sweet. All right, let's print. The suspense. I forgot to turn on the printer, so. I should do a real-time video also about how long it actually takes to print these things, because it's not fast. Okay, it's going. Thank you to Juliet for sharing your cinematic image and letting me print it. I'm gonna put Juliet's Instagram in the description. Make sure that you follow her, and while you're there, like and subscribe, leave a comment. If you want me to print one of your images, all you have to do is follow Nice Art Prints on Instagram and send me a message with the picture that you would like me to print. I'm Mitch Boyer. This is Nice Art Prints. I'll see you around.